Welcome. Welcome to the first short video in the Do-It-Yourself series on how to develop and use metrics, or how to use measures for improvement. This series is presented by Martin Klubeck, the author of Metrics, How to Improve Key Business Results. We're going to start with establishing a common language. The largest obstacle to communications is by far the lack of a common language, a common set of terms and definitions for those terms. By establishing this, we're going to have a foundation for the rest of the series on metrics. And so when we speak about metrics and all the different parts that we're going to deal with, we'll be speaking the same common language. When I think of metrics, the first thing that I visualize, and probably the best visualization I've ever used for communicating it, is a tree. And so when I think about a tree, I think about all the parts of the tree, and the first part I think about the tree is the part that you see from a long distance away, and the part that's very beautiful in the spring and even in the fall when it changes colors. But the part that when it falls and dies and hits the ground, really all it's good for is compost. And that's the leaves. And the leaves are like data. Data are the smallest piece of information that you can possibly have, and it really has no meaning by itself. It's things like 30, 50, highly satisfied, highly dissatisfied, Joe. These don't have any meaning on their own, but they are the building blocks for our next step, which is measures. Measures are data with some amount of context. So if I add miles per gallon to 30, I start having a measure. If I talk about 50%, I start having a measure. And measures are more useful, just like the twigs on the tree start getting us closer to something that might be more useful. When we really get to something that's useful, though, we're talking about information, or the strong limbs of the tree, strong enough to climb on or to hang a tire swing from. These limbs, or information, gives us even more context. So now we say things like 30 miles per gallon in the city, or 50% of the respondents replied highly satisfied. That context makes it where the limbs or the information are actually useful. When we really want to get something useful, though, out of the tree, we think of the trunk. The trunk is the strongest part of the tree, the largest part of the tree, the part of the tree that you can use to build a house. You can tell how old the tree is. It's what you're going to tap to get sap for syrup. But when I think of metric, I don't want to only think of the trunk, because the metric truly encompasses the whole tree. Metrics are made up of information, and information in turn is made up of measures, and measures are in turn made up of data. So a metric encompasses the whole tree. And this tree can't live without a very strong root system. And a metric can't be a metric if it doesn't have a purpose, if it doesn't have a root question that it's trying to answer. So when I think about a tree, when I think about a metric, I have to think of the whole tree, the leaves, the twigs, the branches, the trunk, but especially the roots. The roots give us the foundation, tell us how the tree will live. It feeds the tree. I can't have the tree without it. So when I think of a metric, I'm trying to tell this complete story from the root question all the way out to the data. And if I was thinking of maybe a really complex root question, like instead of how healthy is my two-person unit, but how healthy is not only the department, but how healthy is my whole organization, my whole company, then instead of one tree, I'd envision a forest. Now when we talk about metrics so far, we start at the top, data, and we worked our way down. And that's because it's a mistake that a lot of people make in general. A lot of times when we look at what we have, we say, well, we have data, I want to do something with it. I have all this information or measures in place already. I have charts and graphs. I want to be able to use them. And I always stop my clients and back them up and say, you know what? Instead of going from the top down, we're going to change direction. We're going to work from the bottom up, and we're going to define the root question. We're going to understand what you need this information for. Now sometimes you get the argument, but I might not use all my data. I might be wasting this great data. And with the advent of automated systems as we have today, you can get tons, reams of information, of data, especially data. And it's not all going to be useful, because unlike researchers, we can't afford to just hunt around and try to find answers for questions that we don't know about. We can't be looking for a question for the answers that we already have. We have to know what the questions are. I've heard a lot about analytics lately, analytics and analyzing big data. And that's a great concept, especially again if you could do exploratory research. But most of us can't afford to do that. Most of us can't afford to waste the time, money, or energy, months of time, energy, and money trying to figure out what to do with data and seeing how that data fits and seeing if that data is telling us something about the organization. We're much wiser to start at the bottom, at the root of the tree, and figure out what it is we need to know today to get better today. We're all about improving the way we do business, improving our organization, and that's why we say these are measurements for improvement, not just metrics. Well, if I know the root question, I can draw a picture of what the end product should look like. I don't want to just design a metric with the end in mind. I want to actually design the metric as a result of that end, of that answer to the root question. So I liken that to a person who says, I want to build a house. And he says, well, I'm not sure of what kind of house I want, but I know I want it built on that hill over there. I bought the land already, and I like it to be a pretty nice sized house. So the architect makes some drawings of different houses, maybe shows them pictures of different houses, and that clarifies it for the person. You know, I thought I wanted a ranch style, but now that I see these drawings, I'd like a nice 2-story Gothic. Let's put a basement in and a pool in the backyard. I'd like to see a picket fence. I have a much better idea of what it is I'm thinking of building when I can look at some pictures and get ideas. In error, we normally look at the data and we say, what kind of pictures can we build from it? And we should be looking at what is the thing we're trying to solve, what is the question we need to know the answer to, and then let's think about what kind of pictures might fit. When I do this in a seminar, we draw abstract pictures, totally abstract, nothing to do with data, no charts, no graphs, but just abstract pictures to depict what it is we're trying to answer, what the answer is that we expect. And that helps us get out of the mode of thinking of data and measures, which we shouldn't be. We need to identify the root question. Draw the metric next, and then if I know what the metric is, then I could start thinking about, well, what information do I need to flesh out that picture? Now that I know that it's a 2-story Gothic house, do you want it in brick or do you want it in wood? Are we going to have a wrought iron fence or a picket fence? I know you said a wood picket fence, but are you sure you want that? We can start talking about the information that's going to build that picture properly. And once I know the information, it's an easy step to identify the measures that have to go into the information, and it's ridiculously easy at that point to go out and find the data points. Now, once I know the data that I need to build the measures and information and finally the metric to answer that root question, once I know the data that I need, I can go and look at those automated systems and see what we have. And if we already have the data, awesome, we're way ahead now, because now I'm going to pick and choose the correct data that I need to tell the right story. And I'm going to ignore the other data that I have. But what happens if that data doesn't exist in the systems I currently have? I may have to make the tough decision to invest in a means of getting that data. And if it's critical, I'll get it. But the other route, I wouldn't even have known to get it. I would never look for more data. I would have only settled for what I had. So now I can decide, do I need to go out and get that other data? What data can I stop collecting? If it doesn't hurt me, if it doesn't cost anything, I can let that data be collected, but I'm not going to bother looking at it. I'm going to focus on the things that will help me improve my business today and tomorrow. Now, in a week, a month, after doing this for a while, after a year and improving, you might decide that you have a new root question and you're going to have new metrics, new information, and new measures to look at. And again, you might get back to that data that you needed. So a real simple summarization of what we're talking about is, what is a metric exactly, and all the components. Well, a metric, first and foremost, is always question driven, and that question will be our root question, but it'll always be question driven. We don't try to design a metric, we don't go collect data, develop measures, or put it into a chart or graph and provide information without understanding the purpose. Numerous times I've worked with people that start off saying, I want a survey. And I go, wow, how do you know that? Well, I want to ask these questions. And well, it's not the question they have, it's the question they want to ask their customer because they're looking for feedback. And I say, okay, talk to me more. Why do you want this survey? Why do you want these questions answered? And invariably we work our way down to a real root question. And when we get to that root question, I work my way back up to the information we need to collect. And almost every time we get there, we find out that the survey we would build, or the tool that we would enlist, or the information that we need to gather, which may already be available, is extremely different than what they were asking me to do in the first place. And so I would have wasted my time collecting that. They would have looked at it, and some amount of time would have went by, and they would have said, you know, that really doesn't give me what I want. Let's try something else. So we're going to avoid that by starting from the question and working our way up. The next part is that a metric is always trying to tell a complete story. And that's why we have multiple measures, multiple pieces of information, and if the metric is large enough, we may need other metrics. We want to tell a complete story. Even then, we're only producing an indicator, and we'll talk about that in a later video. But we are trying to tell a complete story in answer to a question. Now, that metric, as we've said, includes the components of data, measures, and information, and each one builds on the other by adding more context. And then of course we can have that forest instead of just a tree, so we'll have to include other metrics. So if you are the type that really want to dive in and you don't want to wait for the next video in this series, feel free to go out and get the book Metrics: How to Improve Key Business Results. That's where all of this information has been captured to make it easier for you. But if you're the visual type of person and you don't mind waiting for the next video in the series to come out, feel free to wait for that. And please participate on discussion boards, ask people, communicate. There are so many people trying to get a handle on how to do metrics that this book and others, and a chance to network with others, will give you the best insights that you can have. Until next time, good luck, and remember, start at the root.